Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming here. It means a lot to us. Great things, start from small steps. And this is our first Shmoop conference, and we hope in 10 years you'll look back and say, hey, I was there. Like, remember that Grateful Dead concert that was there first? I loved what Steve had to say. There were so many different things I loved that I'm just going to pick a couple and use that a little bit as a transition here for my thoughts on Shmoop, because I'm here to tell you the story of Shmoop and how we started and sort of what our foundation is. The thing that moved me most was Steve pointing out that hunger is an education problem. And I hope you'll all test it someday. Don't eat a meal or two, and then try to read something that's not like, the evening news. Try to read something that's hard. Try to read something that's got friction to it when you're hungry. See how well that goes into your brain, and then see what you remember the next day. And note that you have certainty of food. A lot of people don't. So, whole different animal. Another thing I liked about, Steve talked about the grandparents, and the grandparents being lost in Europe and so on. My guess is we had a few relatives up the food chain who intersected. So, this is a country of hope. This is a company of hope. And I think about the opportunity my grandparents and really great-grandparents living in a shtetl in Russia had. A good week was a week that Bessie the cow actually gave milk, didn't die from some weird disease, and the Cossacks didn't come around thinking that week was J-Date, if you know what I mean. So it was a very different dynamic that old Russia gave for what hope was and what opportunity was. It was a world of defense. We play now in a world of offense. The dynamics in the way we define success and the way we define the structure of the economy are very different. And I would argue there's no such thing in a way as the economy. There's the financial economy, but there's the intellectual economy. There's the capital markets of education. There's the capital markets of brand equity associated with the educational path that you've had and what doors that unlocks, what options that gives you in life. So, segue, my wife was one of the original employees at Yahoo. Yahoo, many of you may not remember, stands for You Always Have Other Options, Y-A-H-O-O. So it stands for a few other things too, but that was one of the precepts. And it's a great allegory because the internet is a frictionless society. There are no barriers to clicking. You can click on any website anytime you want, pretty much, and just go there. So Yahoo knew in the early days if it didn't add a ton of value, people would go elsewhere. So we kept that in mind in a very deep way. And maybe I should kind of step back a little bit and talk to you about sort of how Shmoop came into being and how it relates with kind of the vision that we all share in the educational world. And I hear the conversation from many disparate political views. I'm socially extremely liberal, and I'm financially pretty conservative. I feel enormous responsibility for the success that I've had. I feel it would be disrespectful of the memories of my grandparents who died trying to make life better if I didn't give something back. And that's kind of the roots or the basis plate of how Shmoop started. And it's no accident that it's a Yiddish term, which means to move something forward a little bit. So my grandma, who I was very close with, I went to USC Film School and lived with her a bunch, and she was a total hoot. She'd take me to Vegas, and we'd get drunk and play blackjack all night. She was awesome, and you'll see her face around the site and stuff. A lot of it's her humor. And she used to say, Shmoop me my cigarettes and chocolate, and, shut up. And we used to play a lot of mahjong together and stuff like that. So anyway, Shmoop's named after her, frankly. And one of the phrases we use at Shmoop very often is the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I see so many good-hearted people trying to make perfection in the educational landscape that they're forgetting that in order to get here, we have to first go here. And that's a little bit where Shmoop comes in. Steve also mentioned something about the disparate nature of education and the vastly different resources afforded to public school children, particularly here, not public like Beverly Hills 90210 public school, and those in private school or the really good charter schools. It's a different animal. You have different resources. The rich kids get $358 on average to go buy incremental test prep materials so they do 100 points better on the SAT. And we can statistically prove to you that if you prepare for the SAT and or the other tests, you will do better than kids who don't. Really simple. So why should it cost $358 per kid? And it's a misnomer because there's a lot of other things that happen to make that $358 work. There's incremental books to buy and schlepping to do for the kids and so on and so on. Why is that fair? Because if you're poor, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It means you're poor. So do we not feel bad about those kids who have great dreams and hope and opportunity in their back of their pocket and they just don't have someone pushing them forward? And unfortunately, we don't have, teachers. Steve's not the average teacher. So you got all kinds of friction in the society that we're aiming to blow up. So, all this started when I was in business school my first day, and I like to rabble-rouse, and I gave some very hard questions to the CEO of Procter & Gamble, who was doing some very strange things in the way that he was ignoring what I thought was social responsibility in a few ways. And at Stanford Business School, you're supposed to kiss with tongue any part of the body the CEOs want, because that's where you're going to try to get a job after school. That's why you're there, right? So as I got done asking my question, the guy sort of fumfooted around and didn't answer it, and then the moderator quickly moved on to someone else. The whole school turned to me with these really angry glances, except one person who said that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I ended up marrying her about 3 years later. But the next day I said, hey, I've started this company in Russia. The wall's falling. Nobody realizes how liquid the markets are going to become in Moscow very, very quickly. And if we jump on it now, we can just go. And basically it was bartering Hollywood movies and movies of the week into the Czech Republic and Russia and all the other, what was then called Eastern Bloc countries, where they had no way to pay for it. They had no cash. But they had vodka, and they had beaver pelts, which are awesome, keep you nice and warm. They have all kinds of other things that they were able to trade, including advertising time that they couldn't sell locally. So if we could come up with a way to liquefy their advertising time in New York City through an ad agency, we could create a very nice company. And that's what we did, and that was EastNet. So the second day I knew Elle, she called her mother and said, hi, Mom. Yeah, there's a war in Bosnia right now, but I need my passport because this guy I just met is taking me to Zagreb for the weekend. So we did that and commuted back and forth during the war. We were in no danger of being valedictorian at Stanford Business School, but we did graduate and had a lovely time. So that was the first time I did a business with Elle, and it was a complete and total blast. So Shmoop started when our best production, our kids, came, and they came home with lousy material. And our kids are in a rich neighborhood in Silicon Valley with all the best resources the money can buy. And it sucked. So the textbooks were boring, and this is for, second, third graders, fourth graders. The way things were explained wasn't captivating. There was all kinds of friction in the system that didn't need to be there. There's no reason education has to be hard. In fact, I loved education. I was a geek. Like I hung out with my teachers at recess. I liked being told jokes. I liked having the investing business explained to me through golf. Sports make the world very tangible, and there's all kinds of things we can do with that to further our fight against the darkness here. So we started Shmoop as something that was actively designed to be WD-40 in these complex intellectual constructs. So it started with lit guides. I wrote the original ones. We put them out on the website, and the company was just Elle and me and a part-time engineer. And all of a sudden, 1 million people showed up. Sent us letters like, "You are hysterical. You are funny looking." And they sent us all these other things that went through jokes I was telling about, why isn't he called just the pretty good Gatsby? Why was he great? And all the other elemental things that kind of make Shmoop Shmoop. So I turned to Elle and I said, "Hey, this is not a hobby. Maybe this is a business." And, I tried to be a novelist. I tried to be a screenwriter and director, and lack of talent is a great thing in designing your career, because when I kind of got out of film school and I was looking for jobs, they weren't handing me a camera, they were handing me a broom, and it was not a pretty sight. So I ended up going to Wall Street and in Silicon Valley, and have had about 20, 25 years actively investing in technology. And I've been, I guess, a lot lucky and a little bit smart in identifying some of the big megatrends that were out there. So one of the big megatrends I identified was the educational revolution. And Steve mentioned a lot about technology as having a lubricating effect in letting people who are curious discover things they wouldn't otherwise know. The technology itself is just a box if you don't have humanity on it. And there are certain things that are global and have a blind eye toward economic certainty. For example, poor kids and rich kids feel the same pain when their girlfriend breaks up with them. Rich kids and poor kids feel the same sadness when grandma dies. Rich kids and poor kids worry the same about being fat and teased and lonely. So we tap into those elements of pathos to tell our story, to humanize ideas and processes and structures in learning that don't have to exist. They exist because we copy a system that was really created 400 and something years ago, that was really imported by priests and other elements that wrote things from Europe and other places that doesn't make any natural sense today. So Shmoop aims to change that whole dynamic in the way that education is learned and digested. We started out with the lit guides, got 1 million users right away, and they were mostly librarians. You don't think of librarians as being a ribald, joke-filled, goofy group of people, but they are. They're a hoot. And they give me a bunch of jokes. They're like, "Hey, you missed this one on Ulysses. You should have talked about him as, blah, blah, blah." So we've had a riot building this, and we've continued to add a bunch of content. And then we hired Deb, who you're going to hear from next, who took all my lit guides that were sort of like in nematode stage, and she evolved them quickly into a very smart human. And so there's been a giant facelift in lit guides. We had enough love from our user base that we emboldened that piece to include test preparation and now video, which you have a couple thousand videos on there. And I narrate them myself, at least have thus far. And that's been a great learning source, because you can inject humor. You can actually tell a story behind, why is dx over dy? And if dy knew about that, would her mother be angry? So lots of different elements that you can add in education that just aren't there today, because we have human beings in the classroom, and they're not armed properly to fight the war that we've asked them to fight. And we aim to do that. So whatever hardware ends up actually being legitimately in the schools, we want to plumb it, and we hope people use us. So with that idea, the courses effort became a big one. You probably read a lot about MOOCs, massive open online courses. We just teach courses. We call them Shmooks because that's what the press writes a lot about. But they're just online courses, but taught fun and taught with love, and taught with a different kind of mindset, that there's an ecumenical connective fiber that everyone sort of shares, and that learning is stone soup. We all kind of give our own little pieces of food and then eat a rich, thick soup instead of just broth. All of this is meant not for some airy-fairy artistic thing for me. This is meant to move the needle because we have a responsibility, and every kid we fail, we feel it, and it multiplies in generations, and it's just not fair. So we're bringing that wide gap Steve talked about to hopefully be a whole lot narrower, and our people here are going to tell you how we do that. My job has been to design kind of the new products, and we work out the structures of them as a team, and then we have other producers who actually own the vertical of that product and or function inside the company. We're a small company for our core group of people inside of the office, but we have hundreds and hundreds of writers who all work for us in various things, literally all over the world. And it's been just a great joy to build this company. And I don't know many of you in the audience, but I know our team intimately, and boy, it is an honor to work with you guys.